Hi, thanks for joining me on this journey of saying no. You know, in the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to take a closer look at why so many people struggle with saying no. We could literally spend days talking about this topic. We could look at 100 different points associated with it. But today I've just selected 3 to zero in on. So grab your notebook and pen or phone, open up the Notes app and let's begin. Because you're going to start changing your world with this. The 3 key points we'll be looking at today is, firstly, why is it so hard to say no? Then, how to say no without letting people down or feeling like you've let people down. And then thirdly, how to banish anxiety. In other words, saying no without replaying the conversation to yourself over and over. No, it's a small word that packs a lot of power. No can feel like a dirty word. In fact, growing up, many of us were taught that saying no is a negative thing, that it hurts those around us and causes us to miss out on new and exciting opportunities. It's not surprising that so many people are uncomfortable saying it. But the reality is, when you say no, you're not saying I hate you, and you're not insulting someone. What you're doing is something important. You're exercising your right to choose to not engage in whatever has been requested, and for whatever reasons you may have. You say no because it's the best decision for you at that time in your situation. And the reason you say no is in fact your own business and your business alone. One thing I've had to learn over the past year is to decline a request. It's to say no without going into a long explanation to justify my personal decision to say no in the first place. I even find it that I'm worse at it when I send emails and I have to say a no, and I have to keep forcing myself to not give, long reasons. I'm always polite in my no, and I think that's important. Tony Robbins, he says that saying no is a right, it's not a privilege. So the key point, number 1, really, is why is it so hard to say no? In saying no is a right, and I agree with Tony Robbins, I believe it is. Why then do many people find it so difficult just to say no? I think part of the answer stems from the fact that we want to reassure others and make them feel comfortable. But this is a notion we need to discard immediately. Why? Because our inability to say no is not only unfair to ourselves, but it can be unfair to the other person as well. Giving someone a yes because we know that's what they expect does not therefore mean we're going to turn up with joy and energy to carry out the agreement anyway. Disregarding our own feelings and needs seems like an unselfish thing to do. After all, we're taught to give and not take. But just because it's easy to say yes doesn't mean we should. I want you to think about times in the past when you've agreed to do something, be it in your professional or personal life, and then later resented yourself or even the person who asked you in the first place. How did that make you feel? Too often we regret saying yes when we knew at the time of agreeing to the request that we should have politely and confidently said no. Warren Buffett, arguably the world's greatest investor, said we need to learn the slow yes and the quick no. I love that wisdom. Be slow to say yes and quick to say no. Former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair, wrote, "The art of leadership is saying no, not saying yes. It's very easy to say yes." I agree with Blair. We are very good at saying yes because it's often so much easier on an emotional level than to say no. When we say yes, we feel like we've not let anyone down. They can rely on us. We are hardworking, self-sacrificing. But really, maybe we're just too scared to disappoint, upset, or even infuriate the asker. And maybe we do it to our own detriment. Maybe we're afraid of conflict. Let's be honest. None of us like others to be angry with us or critical of us. We therefore avoid saying no when we're afraid that it will put us into conflict with somebody. Avoiding conflict at all costs is a common mantra of many. When we believe we have let someone down or they have somehow rejected us because we said no when they wanted a yes, it impacts us physically. We feel it in our chest, in our stomach, our throat, that horrible feeling of anxiety, stress, sometimes even nausea. I know that for me. My mind can be saying, that was a great decision, Steve, but my body can still go into those horrible, sick feelings. They can be so debilitating, and I don't want to experience that if I can help it. So the result, I avoid letting others down, say yes, and make everybody happy. Fear is a powerful force and often drives us in our decision making. We fear letting people down. We fear being judged. We fear being treated differently if we don't do what's been asked for us. We fear missing out. We fear being spoken of badly. We fear losing friendships. We fear fears. And the list goes on. Fear stops us from doing what we should be doing. Why is it so hard to say no? Because we fear being rejected. We have a genuine desire not to let people down. We don't want to miss out. We want to be the one person that people can depend on always. So the question is, how do you say no without letting people down? It's a huge question. And by no means is it insurmountable. When saying no is difficult to say, that there are other ways to say it, I think, that can feel less harsh. For instance, that will not work for me instead of a no. Or I choose not to. Or not at this time. Saying no is like anything else really. It's a learned skill and one that becomes better when we practice it. Sometimes giving yourself a moment to pause. Think through the scenario a little more before making a decision can be really beneficial. Quickly thinking through in your mind about the pros and the cons to saying yes and being honest about the impact. You'll be empowered to make a better decision because you pause long enough to give it time. When possible, delay the decision as long as you need. Perhaps saying, I'll get back to you in the afternoon on that, or I'll need to talk to my wife and get back to you. Or I'll let you know tomorrow. Or what about, is the end of the week suitable for me to be giving you an answer? I really want to give this some focused consideration. Have you ever stopped to think, what if no would result in a better outcome for both parties? Saying no doesn't have to mean you're being self-serving. It simply means that you're deciding how you spend your time. Saying no because the proposed ask doesn't suit your schedule or beliefs is absolutely okay. In fact, I think it's essential. People are driven by their needs and wants, and we at all times want and hope that others will jump on board with us, but the reality is that sometimes we feel what we want, but it's not really what they want. If you thought through the request and decided on a no, and communicated that clearly and kindly, then their response is completely out of your control. Not everyone will be happy with your no, but that's okay. And you need to stay empowered in the knowledge that you made the right decision for you at this time in your current situation. So the third point was to banish anxiety. I truly believe that none of us want to disappoint or hurt someone else. So we assess the situation, we give the no to the person who made the request, and without wanting to, we begin replaying the conversations to ourselves over and over again. We do this because we're worried. We're even convinced that we've just done the very thing that we didn't want to do, and that was to let someone down. We walk away, we begin to replay the conversation. By the evening, the story's longer and more dramatic and probably very different from the reality of the situation only a few hours ago. If you or I have said no after considered thought, then we need to end it there. We mustn't give our minds that luxury of going down rabbit holes that don't even exist. We must stop the obsessive thinking. We could spend a year just on this topic, and it's an area I've personally always struggled with. But for the sake of this short training video, let me just talk about a few techniques you can apply, or at least try for yourself. We go into this place of circulatory thinking because we believe that by remunerating, like going over and over, we'll somehow gain more insight into the situation. I'm just trying to work it out. I'm working out what I could have said or done differently. Maybe they meant something else to what they really said, and so I'm going to fixate on it and try to work it all out in my head. And it's completely normal to replay or go over past events in an attempt to understand where we went wrong or how we could improve on the situation. But when this becomes all-consuming, it becomes unhealthy for us. So let us first agree that obsessive thinking constant reliving of the conversation, or circulatory thinking, whatever you want to call it, it's just not serving us in any way. In fact, it's a dreadful state to be in. And what I'm going to be explaining now are some simple strategies that will help you begin your journey from yes to no. So first, let's consider the benefits of mindfulness training. You know, recently psychologists have developed cognitive therapies that help patients stop thinking and worrying too much. And these techniques are quite simple and incorporating elements of mindfulness practice. So it's effective because mindfulness requires us to think about how we think, instead of simply jumping into a spiral of negative thoughts. Mindfulness will also bring an increased awareness into your own thinking. In fact, into our own thinking patterns. And it will reinforce your ability to identify triggers and to realize when negative thoughts reach a point of no return. With mindfulness, the aim is to help you gain insights into how your own brain functions, and by focusing on your present state. In this way, you'll be more able to suppress the impulse of obsessively focusing on past events. Secondly, let's look at some problem-solving techniques. Circulatory thinking, or thinking over and over and over again. It's been called problem-solving gone wrong. So it makes sense that one of the key ways in which you can stop it is by learning problem-solving techniques, so you can address and reverse the paralyzing effect of the circulatory thinking. The first step is to ask the right questions. For example, instead of asking why did that happen, you should choose an action-focused question such as, what can I do about it? And then move on to the basic steps of problem solving. Identify the problem, decide on your objective, list the resources that will help you tackle your goals, tackle a step-by-step action plan, put it into writing if necessary. These things help. The third strategy involves not giving your mind time or space to engage in harmful brooding, that harmful circulatory thinking. Instead, keep your mind occupied with something you'll find interesting or motivating. This could be anything from singing, volunteering, or exercising. The important thing is to choose a constructive distraction, not one that could be problematic, like drinking too much or overeating. Admittedly, keeping your mind occupied with something else can be really hard. I have struggled, and I do. And it's all too easy to unconsciously drift into this circulatory thinking. But do your best to replace poor thinking patterns. Do your best to replace it, because it'll get easier as you practice. Do it over and over. Practice mindfulness. So to sum up this first bit, here are some key takeaways for you to think about and then put into practice. Because remember, life is short. When we don't say no to things others want from us, then we are losing time and the opportunity to do the things we want to do. Our values and priorities can guide us to say no, which can open up opportunities for us to say yes to the things that really matter.